So, have you noticed that The Rock saves on that wardrobe budget? I mean, I love the guy in his movies, but I failed at trying to differentiate which movie was which. Pretty much scored a 3 out of 10 in this supercut of his movies, but that's also what's made him super successful, because for those of us who have followed him since the tight Spanx, and still follow him through the tight tanks, we know that The Rock himself is the product. He's continuing a legacy started by his father, whose stage name was Rocky Johnson, and now his is a household name. He not only has hits, but he has a whole upcoming list of movies longer than the ideas I have for videos. And this is a guy who's so ahead of his time, he doesn't even acknowledge he's in his 40s. He just says he's on the 4th level. So as a dude on his 2nd level, and a guy who has a channel that breaks down media and art, I wanted to dissect The Rock and his brand. Because you know that Sandler has a brand. Tom Cruise runs a brand. Kevin Hart never cheats on his brand. And after watching Rampage, which was a movie that I enjoyed, I thought it was fun, until I got to that ending, I realized that there's one thing that his brand stays away from. Death. Now, I'm not saying I want The Rock to die, because honestly, I don't think he can. But what I am saying is that all of his movies are built to be feel-good movies. Nothing wrong with that. He's always the good guy. He always finishes the rescue. He always gets the happy ending. And that's why his characters are very interchangeable. That's why they always have the same mannerisms, because we're not really invested in the characters. We just always go into the movies because we want to see The Rock. And we always remember The Rock. That's why even his animated films look like him. Like, Tom Hanks didn't look like Woody. Maui straight up motion captures this man's smolder. He has that infectious charisma Will Smith had back in the day. Still has, I would argue, but with like 100 pounds more of muscle. That's why in a recent interview with Rolling Stone, he mentioned that no one's going to see me play a borderline psychopath suffering from depression. That people come to see him play the hero, and that's why, as he publicly spoiled the movie, George doesn't die in Rampage, because he's built a trust with his audience, and when they come to see one of his movies, he's guaranteeing that they will leave happy. Now, some would argue that that's why Baywatch didn't do so well, because he was kind of a dick in that movie, but some would also argue that that's why a lot of his movies are kind of empty, because they lack consequences, because they always want to end up with that happy ending. But I believe, and here's my theory, that The Rock fits perfectly with a thing I call the Logan effect. A movie I'm sure most people have seen, so hopefully it's not that big of a deal to spoil it, but it's also a film that wraps up a character, an icon, a role that defined an actor for almost 2 decades, so we were completely invested in him. And that's why his death hit harder than a mother. For a second, think about what it takes to establish a character like that, right? To make full-grown men cry over a fictitious being. It can't just be a character that comes in a movie and then it's like you get slightly attached and then they all of a sudden die. It has to be someone who's established, and Logan was established. The Rock is established. His presence alone attracts an audience, and I'm not saying that his movies aren't good. Making this video because I look up to the guy. Everyone looks up to the guy. He's super huge, except, you know, maybe George. He's the only one who can look down on him. I'm making this video because he's built himself up to a point where if he wanted to, he can create one of the most emotional endings to a movie. At the end of Rampage, when George pretty much sacrifices his life, I actually thought the movie was going to have the guts to go that route, right? Not to say that it was going to put it on Caesar's level or break the video game curse, but that the movie would actually show consequences, something I'm not fully used to in a Rock movie, to have a little bit more of an impact after all the impact the movie gave me. And as The Rock continues to evolve, as he himself says, from a wrestler to a family movie star, now the biggest action star, my theory is that this is the next step. I mean, he looks up to Schwarzenegger, and he did it multiple times, and those gut-wrenching moments have become iconic. What I'm saying is that for a man who's broken pillars, punched a helicopter off of a cliff, punched torpedoes, I think the biggest thing he can cook up for his people is a gut-wrenching elbow finish.